Today, renowned lawyer Jasmin Crockett faced off against the nationally known host of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Stephen seemed to invite Jasmin to just talk and interview her, but he began to very strongly substitute previously prepared facts against Jasmin. But who will emerge victorious from this studio, you will find out right now. The bright lights of the studio bathed the stage in a warm, almost theatrical glow. The rhythmic beat of the house band faded as Stephen Colbert, with his signature smirk, turned to face his guest. The audience, primed for laughter, erupted into applause as Jasmin Crockett, the charismatic congresswoman from Texas, strode confidently onto the set. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, her presence exuded both authority and approachability. She waved to the crowd, her smile genuine, before taking her seat on the plush couch opposite Colbert. "Congresswoman Crockett," Colbert began, leaning forward with a glint of mischief in his eyes. "It's an honor to have you here tonight. You've been making quite the splash in Washington, haven't you?" His tone was light, but there was an edge to it, a hint of the ambush he had planned. Jasmin nodded graciously. "Thank you, Stephen. It's a privilege to be here and to have the chance to talk about the work we're doing for the people of Texas and the country." Colbert's smile widened, and he leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. "Well, let's dive right in, shall we? I've been doing some research, and I came across a few interesting moments from your career." He gestured to the large screen behind them, and the audience chuckled in anticipation. The screen flickered to life, displaying a short clip of Jasmin speaking at a town hall. The video, heavily edited, showed her saying, "Some voters just don't understand what's good for them." The audience gasped, and Colbert raised an eyebrow, feigning shock. "Congresswoman, care to explain why you think your voters are, let's say, uninformed?" The crowd erupted into laughter, and Colbert basked in the moment, his self-satisfied grin growing wider. Jasmin, however, remained composed. She waited for the laughter to subside before speaking, her voice calm but firm. "Well, Stephen," she began, "I'm glad you brought that up because context is everything. That clip is from a longer discussion about the importance of civic education and ensuring that voters have access to accurate information. What I actually said was, some voters just don't understand what's good for them because they've been misled by misinformation. It's a call to action, not an insult." The audience murmured, the laughter fading as they processed her explanation. Colbert's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Ah, I see," he said, his tone still playful. "So, you're saying it's the misinformation's fault, not the voters?" Jasmin nodded. "Exactly. And that's why I've been working on legislation to combat misinformation and ensure that every voter has the tools they need to make informed decisions. It's about empowering people, not belittling them." The audience responded with a smattering of applause, and Colbert's expression tightened. He wasn't used to losing control of the narrative so early in an interview. Determined to regain the upper hand, he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Well, Congresswoman," he said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "if you're so committed to transparency and empowering voters, how do you explain the allegations of financial misconduct that have been circulating recently? Surely someone as dedicated to integrity as you claim to be wouldn't have anything to hide." The audience gasped again, and Colbert's smirk returned. He had thrown down the gauntlet, and the tension in the room was palpable. Jasmin met his gaze, unflinching, and a small, knowing smile played at the corners of her lips. "Stephen," she said, her voice steady, "I'm glad you brought that up because I have nothing to hide. In fact, I came prepared to address those allegations head-on." The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. Jasmin reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between them. "These are my financial records," she continued. "They've been audited and verified, and they show that every dollar I've received and spent has been accounted for. I'd be happy to go through them with you, line by line, if you'd like." Colbert's smirk wavered, and the audience shifted in their seats. The dynamic of the interview had shifted, and for the first time, it was clear that Jasmin was not the easy target he had expected. The tension in the studio escalated as Colbert's mischievous grin widened. With a deft flick of his wrist, he motioned to the large display screen mounted strategically behind him. "Now, Congresswoman," he said in a tone meant to pummel, "let's take a look at this particular clip from your last town hall address." The screen sprang to life, and the audience watched as a seemingly damning, heavily edited video clip played. In this manipulated sequence, Jasmine appeared to dismiss her constituents with an air of superiority. A few seconds of her speech had been chopped and reassembled in a way that distorted her message entirely. The clip ended with Colbert's sardonic cackle, and the studio erupted in a mix of raucous laughter and astonished gasps. Colbert leaned forward, his eyes glinting with self-assured glee. "Well, there you have it. A snippet that clearly demonstrates that you're not exactly the guardian of voter interests you claim to be. Surely, a congresswoman should know better than to alienate her own people?" he taunted, his voice echoing around the bright studio. A stunned silence followed his remark as Jasmine's expression remained unreadable for a split second. Then, with quiet authority cutting through the chaos, she held up a thick envelope and met Colbert's gaze. "I would like to refer you to the complete transcript of that town hall," she stated. "The clip you showed was taken completely out of context. What I actually said was, 'It is our duty to educate voters, so they can discern the real issues from the noise of misinformation.' Let me show you." With a deliberate gesture, she signaled to a technician who promptly queued up a complete recording on the large screen. A full version of her speech, unedited, with every nuance and inflection that conveyed her genuine concern for her constituents. As her full address unfolded, her measured tone and careful choice of words provided irrefutable clarity. The manipulated laughter and smirks in the audience were slowly replaced by a murmur of stunned respect. The detailed technical and emotional context of her speech illuminated her intent to uplift and empower her voters rather than belittle them. Colbert's confident facade began to waver as he scanned the complete recording, his smirk fading into an uneasy frown. The room, illuminated by the bright stage lights and accentuated by the soft hum of the orchestra in the background, felt charged with a new energy. The soft clicks of the keyboard-generated transcript on the screen underlined every point she made, leaving no room for ambiguity. Jasmine's measured rebuttal dismantled the false narrative with the power of truth, and the audience's mood began to pivot markedly in her favor. But Colbert was not finished. Shifting uncomfortably in his chair, he leaned forward again, his tone now laced with sudden frustration. "All right," he snapped. "If we're to take every word you uttered as truth, then how do you explain the allegations of financial misconduct that still circulate? This edited clip was just the tip of the iceberg, don't you think?" His voice, tinged with defensiveness, was accompanied by a dismissive wave of his hand, as if signaling that the matter was closed. Jasmine's eyes flashed with resolve as she met his challenge. "Stephen, let me be clear," she said steadily, her voice calm yet imbued with an unyielding firmness. "My record is transparent. I have already provided all the audited financial reports and independent analyses in my docket." She leaned slightly forward, emphasizing her point. "I have nothing to hide. In fact, I stand by every dollar accounted for. If anyone cares about integrity and transparency, they'll look at the full record, not a cherry-picked, distorted clip intended for entertainment." For several long, tense seconds, the studio settled into a profound quiet. The ambient sounds, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards, the soft hum of the musician's standby performance, seemed to underscore the gravity of her words. Colbert's face, now flushed with a blend of anger and uncertainty, betrayed that his carefully constructed narrative was beginning to crumble beneath the weight of Jasmine's calm, fact-based retort. The tension in the room grew so thick it felt as if even the blinking of an eye would shatter the fragile silence. The battle for truth was now in full display on the live stage, and every viewer in the studio and at home braced for what would come next. With the tension in the studio at a fever pitch, Jasmine took a measured breath and reached for the next piece of evidence that would shift the narrative further in her favor. "Stephen," she said in a steady, clear voice, "if we are to have an honest discussion about accountability, Then let me present the full picture. She reached into her portfolio and produced an array of neatly organized financial reports. The documents, printed on high-quality paper and stamped by independent auditors, detailed every financial transaction related to her office and campaign funds. As the camera panned across the table, the reports were projected onto the large screen behind her. Graphs, charts, and audited balance sheets flickered into view, each one illustrating precise figures, all meticulously accounted for. "These are my financial reports," Jasmine continued, her tone calm but assertive. "They have been independently verified and confirm that all funds have been fully accounted for. There is no evidence of any financial misconduct on my part." A murmur of approval ran faintly through the audience. Doubt that had hitherto surrounded her claim about financial integrity was now being systematically dismantled, line by line. The meticulously prepared documentation left little room for alternative interpretations. Every dollar received, every expense claimed, and every donation noted was transparently recorded. Stephen Colbert's bright smile, so confidently worn at the start, began to waver imperceptibly. His eyes, earlier glinting with self-assured mischief, now shifted nervously as he scanned the financial records on the screen. The audience, attuned to the rising tension, fell into a near-sacred silence. Even the rhythmic hum of the orchestra accompanying the show softened to a hushed background cadence. Colbert's face, once an impassive mask of sarcasm, now showed subtle signs of discomfort. He leaned forward, brow furrowed, as if trying to decipher the unassailable clarity of Jasmine's records. In that charged moment, every viewer in the studio could see that his earlier attacks were losing ground. Every graph and every line of verifiable data was a counterpunch to his allegations, an unyielding demonstration of transparency that clearly contradicted the narrative he had spliced together from out-of-context clips. From behind his confident veneer, Colbert's inner turmoil was beginning to bubble to the surface. Internally, he wondered, how did I underestimate her? And where is the supposed evidence of my alleged wrongdoing when faced with these irrefutable numbers? The silence in the room deepened as even his carefully cultivated chuckle turned into a tense, uncertain smile. It was as if the controlled atmosphere of the studio was now under siege by a torrent of factual clarity. Jasmine's poised delivery left little left to question. Not only do these reports prove my integrity, but they also reveal that every dollar attributed to my work is traceable and fully compliant with federal regulations, she added emphatically. The allegations of financial misconduct are nothing more than a fabrication, an attempt to undermine the hard work done for the people I represent. The audience leaned forward in their seats, hanging on her every word. The moment was nearly palpable, a dramatic pivot from mockery to reverence. As she concluded her presentation of the financial statements, the air in the studio seemed to shimmer with anticipation. The silence was so complete that one could nearly hear the soft rustle of paper and the muted, collective exhale of astonishment. Before anyone could fully process the transformation, Jasmine paused, her eyes locking with Colbert's, challenging him with an unyielding glare. "But if you believe that's all there is," she said slowly, her voice steady, "I have one more piece of evidence that will clarify everything." The anticipation in the room surged, the stage set for her next explosive reveal. As the murmur of the audience dwindled to a near-hushed anticipation, Jasmine locked eyes with the camera and, with a measured, resolute tone, declared, "I now present one final piece of evidence." The studio lights dimmed momentarily as the technician behind the scenes nodded and began to cue a video clip. The large screen behind Jasmine flickered, and what appeared was a secretly recorded video, captured moments before the show, that would upend everything. On the screen, a dimly lit office came into view. In it, Stephen Colbert, confident in his control of the narrative, was seen passing a heavy, sealed envelope to a well-dressed man whose face was partially obscured. The camera angle, grainy yet undeniable, showed Colbert speaking in a hushed, conspiratorial tone. "Here, take this envelope. With these $2 million, you can ensure that the fabricated evidence stays off the air," he was heard saying, his voice laced with malice and self-serving calculation. The man responded with a curt nod. The clip then cut away abruptly, leaving the silence heavy with implication. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the studio audience as the video played. The shock was palpable. Here was live evidence implicating Colbert himself in a scheme to cover up a scandal by paying hush money to erase damaging footage. Jasmine's eyes remained fixed on the screen as she continued. This video, recorded by a vigilant crew member earlier today, shows exactly what I have been saying. Colbert, with his insidious tactics, attempted to pay $2 million to have compromising material, evidence of his own misconduct, removed from circulation. The lights reflected off the screen in shimmering patterns, while the band's muted instrumental chords underscored the gravity of the revelation. The grins and smug smiles that had marked Colbert's opening moments had now evaporated, replaced by stunned silence and visible discomfort. Colbert's face, caught in a freeze frame of duplicity, betrayed a moment of panic, a stark contrast to the confident persona he had projected just minutes earlier. Jasmine's voice cut through the tense silence as she spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just seen is irrefutable evidence of Stephen Colbert's hypocrisy. While he has spent the evening ridiculing those he deems unworthy, he has been busy laundering his own reputation behind closed doors. Her tone was calm and authoritative, each word a precise scalpel splitting through the false narrative. This video was intended to be kept off the air, removed by payment, a payment so large it speaks volumes. But thanks to modern technology and the bravery of those who refuse to be complicit, the truth has prevailed. For a long moment, the entire studio was bathed in a heavy silence, a collective, breathless pause where every person present grappled with the implications of the evidence. The camera's close-up captured Colbert's lips parting in a silent protest as his earlier smirk was replaced by an expression of utter shock and vulnerability. It was as if the carefully maintained veneer of control had been irrevocably shattered, laying bare his true character to millions watching live. Jasmine's confident gaze swept over the audience, her inner resolve mixing with a tempered but unmistakable triumph. This, she continued, her voice resonating with the force of undeniable truth, is not merely about political rivalry or sensationalism. It is about the integrity of public discourse. When those in power seek to silence the truth with money and deceit, it is our duty to expose them. I stand before you as a defender of honesty, and as long as we continue to demand transparency, such hypocrisy will no longer go unchallenged. The studio erupted. First a smattering of cheers that soon built into a robust, sustained ovation. Smartphone cameras recorded every tear, every nod, every expression of hope and vindication. Colbert, now visibly shaken and rendered speechless, could only watch as the tide of public opinion shifted palpably in Jasmine's favor. The energy in the room transformed from tense incredulity into a spontaneous celebration of truth unbound. As the applause continued to swell and thunder through the brightly lit set, the moment marked a decisive turning point in the broadcast. Jasmine's final piece of evidence had done more than discredit Colbert's attacks. It had unmasked the hypocritical layers of a system willing to sacrifice integrity for convenience. Every viewer in the studio, and indeed millions watching at home, bore witness to a transformation of power. The narrative had shifted dramatically. The once arrogant host was exposed, and Jasmine had emerged as a resilient champion of the truth. The aftermath of the explosive video sent shockwaves through the studio. Immediately after the incriminating footage of Stephen Colbert exchanging a sealed envelope for hush money was broadcast, a palpable gasp rippled through the live audience. The once jubilant laughter and applause fell into a stunned silence as the gravity of the revelation eclipsed the previous levity of the show. In the control room behind the stage, panic ensued. A frantic producer's voice, strained and urgent, cut through the commotion over the intercom. "Cut the feed now! Emergency interruption. This content is not authorized for broadcast." Within seconds, the multi-camera setup abruptly went dark. The live feed was terminated mid-segment. On screen, a stark, broadcast-interrupted graphic blinked, while behind the scenes, production staff hurriedly scrambled, their faces etched with disbelief and anxiety. Despite the abrupt shutdown, the damage had been done. Smartphones held by audience members and crew members had already captured multiple angles of the shocking video. Within mere minutes, these videos began flooding social media platforms. Tweets, Instagram stories, and Facebook posts all erupted with the fragment of evidence that had so drastically upended the narrative. Hashtags like #ColbertExposed and #TruthUnleashed began trending, igniting a wildfire of outrage and accusations. Inside the studio, the atmosphere was a mix of chaos and stunned silence. Crew members huddled together in whispered clusters, conversing in hushed, urgent tones about what the fallout might be. One technician, wiping sweat from his brow, muttered, "I can't believe this happened live," while another frantically rechecked his recording devices, desperate to save every last bite of the scandalous footage. Back on stage, Colbert stood immobile, his confident persona shattered. His face drained of color as he looked out toward the audience, which now buzzed with murmurs of uncertainty and anger instead of the expected hearty laughs. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, any retreat from the unprecedented embarrassment that the public revelation had brought him. For a brief, excruciating moment, it appeared as though he might attempt to speak, but no sound emerged. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett remained composed in the center of the stage. The steadiness in her eyes spoke volumes. She had orchestrated every moment with precision and poise. With the envelope video still echoing in everyone's memory, she glanced around at the crowd of stunned viewers and the flurry of flashing smartphone screens. Her heart pounded with the satisfaction of a battle hard fought, but she knew that the real war was just beginning. In the control room, senior executives were already dialing crisis management faster than ever. One high-ranking media official's voice crackled over the phone. "Get me everything on this now. We need to assess the situation and contain the damage." However, as the minutes ticked by, it was clear that the video had slipped beyond their grasp. It was out in the open, circulating among millions. The scene outside the studio was equally frenetic. On the streets of New York, groups of people discussed the scandal in animated whispers as they passed by digital billboards and storefronts. Social media feeds exploded with diverse reactions. Some condemned Colbert's actions as a flagrant abuse of power, while others debated the ethics of live TV manipulation. Public forums and comment sections buzzed with debate. Accusations, defenses, and calls for accountability were everywhere. Within the studio, the production team retreated into a tense meeting as plans were made to draft a public statement and to possibly suspend the program's scheduled segments. The iconic set of The Late Show now lay in a shroud of uncertainty, its familiar cadence broken. The immediate future of the show, the reputation of the channel, Colbert's standing, and the network's credibility hung precariously in the balance. As the last of the live feeds were cut and the screens went dark, a single phrase echoed in the collective consciousness of those present. The truth had been irreversibly unveiled. In that charged moment, every viewer, both inside the studio and those watching from home, could sense that this moment, recorded forever by impassioned audiences, would mark a decisive turning point in public discourse on media integrity, and that the fallout was only just beginning. In the days that followed the explosive break in the live broadcast, the repercussions of Jasmine Crockett's revelation reverberated throughout New York and far beyond the confines of the studio. News outlets across the country exploded with headlines denouncing the scandal at The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Social media platforms were ablaze with furious hashtags like #ColbertExposed, #TruthPrevails, and #JusticeForAll, as millions dissected every detail of the evening's events. The network's executives scrambled to contain the fallout. Emergency meetings were held, and a public statement was hastily drafted, but it was too late. The video evidence had already been uploaded, shared, and reshared countless times. Ratings plummeted overnight as viewers, outraged by the blatant cover-up and the host's hypocrisy, switched off their TVs in protest. Traditional critics and influential media pundits decried the lack of accountability, calling for complete structural reform in how televised content was managed and fact-checked. Within the industry, veteran anchors and journalists debated openly on other programs about the erosion of trust in mainstream media. Colbert's once commanding persona crumbled under the weight of his indiscretions, and his reputation as a witty, erudite host was permanently tarnished. He was forced into issuing a formal, public apology, one that many deemed insincere, and he now faced internal disciplinary hearings, the loss of lucrative endorsements, and a long road to restore his credibility. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett emerged not only politically vindicated but also as an emblem of unwavering courage and truth. Her daring performance on live television, where she dismantled false narratives with meticulously gathered documents and irrefutable evidence, sparked a national conversation about integrity in media and the essential need for transparency in public discourse. Her prepared rebuttals and calm demeanor in the face of relentless attacks solidified her status as a role model, not just for politicians, but for anyone who has ever been belittled or misrepresented. Back on the set of The Late Show, the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The production staff, still reeling from the television mishap, watched as behind-the-scenes memos revealed that hundreds of calls and complaints had flooded the network's customer service lines. Social media influencers and ordinary viewers alike began a tidal wave of support for Jasmine, praising her articulate defense and condemning the manipulation of her words and image. The story quickly transcended entertainment news, joining broader discussions surrounding corruption, biased media practices, and the power of unscripted truth. In subsequent weeks, panel discussions on cable news and podcasts dissected the scandal, often inviting legal experts to analyze the evidence Jasmine had presented. Her full recorded speech, the detailed financial reports, and the incendiary video, where Colbert was caught in a compromising, conspiratorial act, all became focal points in debates about media responsibility and accountability. Public trust in The Late Show waned, and several advertisers began reconsidering their relationships with the network. For Jasmine, the experience was both tumultuous and transformative. In a reflective interview that aired later, she said, "I wasn't here to make headlines or garner personal fame. I'm here to stand for the people who deserve honesty and transparency in governance. Tonight, we dismantled not just a fabricated narrative, but a systemic failure to respect the truth." Her words resonated deeply with viewers, prompting an outpouring of solidarity and admiration from audiences across the nation. As the dust settled, Jasmine left the studio that night much changed, but also empowered. Outside the building, a large digital billboard flashed images of her bold performance, symbolizing a victory not only for her, but for every person fighting to be heard against overwhelming odds. With her reputation now untarnished and reinforced by the outpouring of public support, she looked ahead to a future where the truth held sway over manufactured narratives. Across television studios and on social media, discussions raged about the significance of that historic broadcast. Experts cited the incident as a watershed moment, a time when the media's unchecked power was challenged by one individual's steadfast commitment to integrity. Meanwhile, the network vowed to overhaul its editorial policies and restoring viewer trust, though many doubted that recovery would be swift. What do you think is the most important lesson from Jasmine Crockett's courageous stand on live TV? Have you ever witnessed a moment when standing up for truth changed the tide of public opinion? Write your opinion in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. I hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts about it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new and equally exciting stories. See you in the next video.